Evelyn, and on behalf of the Alpha Gamma Sigma Club, the Future Teachers Society, and Academic Learning Center Tutoring Club, I'd like to welcome all of you today to our presentation. Our guest speaker today is Dr. Shannon Kincaid. He's Associate Professor of Philosophy, and the topic is going to be good versus great teaching. Currently, his research projects include publishing on the ethical responsibilities of educators. And it's my pleasure because he was my former professor, so I know it will be very enlightening. And without further ado, may I present to you Dr. Shannon Kincaid. Yeah.
Hey, come on in. I always get nervous around the word enlightening because I know nothing about electricity. My name's Shannon Kincaid, and this is my 6th year at Queensborough, and I've been at the City University of New York for 9 years. I went to kindergarten. I went to 1st grade. I went from 2nd grade all the way to my senior year. And then I decided to go to college. And 11 years later, it wasn't very speedy. When my son asked me, what grade were you in when you graduated from college, I think would that be grade 24? It's really depressing when you think about it, so try not to think about it. I went to school for 23 years. Most people go for anywhere from 8 to 12 to 14 to 16 to 20 to even longer. I was one of the poor suckers that liked school so much they made me leave. And obviously I think that's a good thing. You have to defend education, and you'll see in a moment, I'm going to give you some reasons as to why education is so important. But I think there's a downside to that. And the downside is that because everybody has been exposed to education, everybody thinks that they know what it is, regardless of whether or not they've actually been trained in teaching, regardless of whether or not they've actually stood in front of a classroom. And one of the things that I always like to do to my students, I don't have very many of them. I want you to take my class, but is I work really hard to make sure that you understand how difficult this job is. How many people in here are planning on becoming teachers? Good teachers make it look easy, but trust me, it's not easy. It's one of the most challenging jobs that you can possibly have. And what I hope to do today is I hope to give you an idea of some of the challenges and some of the rewards of teaching and some of the things that you need to keep in mind when you're trying to become the best teacher that you can actually become. Now, with regards to the rewards of teaching, I would just start out by saying this. One of my favorite quotes is by a Greek poet by the name of Philoxenus, and his quote goes like this. He says, "We should honor our teachers more than our parents, because while our teachers cause us to live, our teachers cause us to live well." And I like the quote because it says something about the nature of education. And it says something about what it is that we are doing when we try to educate individuals. And to me, it points into the heart of what pedagogy is all about. Now, in all honesty, pedagogy is tricky business. If you've had your education courses or you've had your philosophy courses, you know that pedagogy has something roughly to do with the art and the craft of education. Some people will define it as the quote-unquote philosophy of education. Etymologically, it means something different than that. Etymologically, it means leadership of the youth, which makes it even more complicated to define. But defining pedagogy is so difficult because, at least for me, And I think that anybody that's thought about the issue comes to realize very quickly that pedagogy is that field of human inquiry, which I think is probably A, the most important, but is also B, the most philosophically dense form of inquiry. It's one thing to talk about teaching. It's another thing to talk about what it means to teach and how to teach. And that's where we get into, hey, come on in. How you doing? You can't talk about pedagogy without talking about theories of knowledge. In other words, you can't talk about pedagogy without talking about epistemology. And this sounds weird, but when you talk about epistemology and you talk about pedagogy, you're talking about really dumb things. Dumb things like what makes 2 plus 2 equals 4? What makes a belief true? Or when is a belief justified? You also have to talk about things like the nature of reality. What kind of world do we live in? Do we have to say something about the nature of reality to say something about what truth is? Or do we have to say something about what truth is before we can talk about the nature of reality? We also have to ask ontological questions. We've got to ask about what sorts of things exist. Do relationships between people exist? What is it that makes a parent, or what is it that makes a student-teacher relationship? Does a student exist because they stand in relation to a teacher? Does a teacher exist simply because they stand in relation to a student? What is the nature of that sort of relationship? You can't talk about pedagogy without talking about values and what sort of values that we're trying to bring across in the classroom. Is it our job as teachers to try and train people with regards to things like morality, like justice? Is it our job to steer clear of those things? Is it our job to teach people about aesthetics? What about beauty? Is beauty something that we leave for individuals to decide for themselves, or do we try to provide them with some sort of guidance in that? What about things like political and social institutions? Are classrooms places where we shouldn't be discussing things like political values? Or are they the place where we should be discussing political values? As most of you probably know, it is forbidden by the New York City Department of Education for a teacher to wear a political button in a classroom. Is that right? I mean, is a teacher doing something wrong by espousing a certain value in a classroom where openness and dialogue are supposed to be the name of the game? You also can't talk about teaching and pedagogy without talking about things like sociology. You can't talk about it without talking about things like the family. You can't talk about it without talking about the nature of economics. Who's going to pay for all of this? And so when you start talking about issues of pedagogy, you start realizing that it's not one thing you're talking about. It's this entire grouping of issues that are so intertwined that you can't pluck them apart. That's one of the reasons why. I mean, how many education majors have taken your philosophy class yet? That's why everybody walks into my class like this. I don't want to take this class. I don't want to take this class. And why don't you want to take that class? Because you're afraid. You know what's going to happen. It's my job to take you and go like this. So that when you walk out of the class, I get people that walk out of the class, geez, I was afraid you were going to have me question God. And now I'm questioning whether 1 plus 1 equals 2. But that's the nature of the business. I mean, it's the nature of what a good teacher is. A good teacher has something to do with cultivating inquiry. A good teacher has something to do with not only passing knowledge down to subsequent generations, but with also instilling in them a sense of intellectual curiosity. And that's the name of the game. And I hate to say it, and I don't want to sound mean, but there's a lot of people that teach that shouldn't be teaching. And I'm I'm sorry. And this kind of reaches into the heart of the lecture that I'm trying to present today, is that I really think at bottom, help me. I think at bottom, most people can be a bad teacher. I think most people can be a competent teacher, but I think very few people can be great teachers. And I say that because I think that being a great teacher demands a set of talents, it demands a set of skills, and it demands a set of commitments that a lot of people are either unwilling or unable to cultivate in their lives. Now, we can't talk about pedagogy in contemporary American society without talking about the philosopher John Dewey. I love John Dewey. I wrote part of my dissertation on John Dewey. John Dewey is one of the most abused and misunderstood philosophers in the history of Western philosophy. People take this poor guy and they twist him and they pull him and they push him and they take his words out of context and they take his ideas and they try to make him mean things that they don't. And you are at some point in time in your, if you haven't already, in your training as teachers going to be exposed to the ideas of this gentleman. And one of the things that I want to disabuse you of is some of the myths that people have about John Dewey, in an effort to clarify what I mean about the talents and the skills that are necessary to be a great teacher. John Dewey broke education into 4 basic categories. And these categories were intertwined. He said first and foremost, education is about a transmission of custom, okay? That what we were doing as educators is we were taking what we received from our parents and from our mentors and from our teachers, and we were passing it on to you. And that a second part of education was that we were attempting to instill in you a sense of the social order that makes this thing that we call society possible. I mean, let's face it, if we don't have a basic respect for each other, and if we're not nice to each other, and if we let Johnny steal Annie's candy, or we let Steve kick Johnny's butt on the playground, things are not going to work. So there's got to be discipline, and there's got to be custom and values. But there's got to be more than that. And this is one of the things that I think that John Dewey recognized. Above custom and above social order. See, if you've just got custom and social order, how do I say this in a nice way? If you just got custom and social order, we would still be living in caves throwing rocks at each other. All right? We would have never gone anywhere. But what education has to be for somebody like John Dewey is step beyond that. It's where the educator engages in the process of guiding human experience. Okay? In taking the experiences and the sorts of, what's the word I'm looking for? Predispositions of the youth, and guiding them and moving in a direction which is productive. And when I say productive, I mean this from an experiential sense. One of the things that John Dewey meant when he talked about experience, look, experience, we have a tendency to think of experience as like that video camera, right? We sit there and we go like this, and sorry video camera, I don't mean to insult you, but we have a tendency to think of experiences like this. Right? We sit there and it just comes in, right? And we sit, that's why it's so funny when philosophers watch things like reality TV, right? It's supposed to be like experience. It's like, it's not. It's like non-experience. Because it's you sitting there watching some guy eating spiders with drool running out of the corner of your mouth, right? That's not experience. You can't replace the classroom environment with a CD, because what do you have? You have people sitting there passively receiving this stuff What you have to have is you have to have this in your face. I'm challenging you. Look, wait till you get in front of a classroom. See, you haven't been in front of a classroom enough. When you get in front of a classroom, and the people that have been in front of a classroom, you'll back me up on this. You spend any time at all in front of a classroom, each class is different. And if you're paying attention, you're watching everybody in the room. And you're seeing how they're reacting. I can see who's turning off. I can see who's turning on. And so it becomes my job to make sure that if you're turning off, I'm dragging you back into the experience. Right? If you're here, I need to make sure that I'm keeping you here. And so the whole key becomes, how can I turn this thing that we call chalk and talk, or whatever, into something that grabs you and pulls you in and forces you to pay attention to it. That's what a good educator has to do. They have to be able to accelerate, to be able to exemplify, to be able to pull you in and to force you to actively structure what it is that you're receiving. In other words, to think about it, not just memorize it, right? In high school, what did you learn to do? Memorize. That's not learning, okay? Learning is something different, and that's Dewey's fourth category. Education is not memorization. It has never been memorization. If it was, it would just be custom. Memorization is done. When you get to college, you are not memorizing. When you get to college, you are engaged in the process of continual growth. And that's Dewey's fourth category. You're not learning by memorizing. You are learning by doing. You are learning by engaging in the process. And that's what a bad teacher doesn't do. A bad teacher stands up and goes, 1, blah, 2, blah, 3, blah. Any questions? A good teacher goes, 1, blah. Is this true? Do you agree with this? Does this matter to you? Does this match with your experience? If you believe this, what are the consequences of this? What about the counter argument to this position? Think critically about it. Think speculatively about it. Think about how this matches up with other parts of your experience. Think about it in terms of your college experience as a whole. Here's a stupid question for you. How many people are taking a sociology class? How many people are taking an education class, or half? How many people are taking psychology? Which one is right? It's a stupid question, isn't it? Why? Why? Why is it a dumb question? You laughed. Because they're all right. They're just different perspectives. They're different ways of looking at the world. And that's what you're doing when you are getting a college education, is that you are cultivating the ability to look at the world from different perspectives. And that's what a good teacher does, is they help you do that. But it's a very personal experience. It's something that you have to throw out. It's something, it takes a risk. And it takes certain talents, and it takes certain commitments. First and foremost, you've got to put passion into this. You've got to care about it. I don't care if you're teaching second grade mathematics or if you're teaching philosophy in college. You've got to be passionate about your discipline, and you've got to think that it matters. And you've got to have the speculative ability as a teacher to make sure that you can connect what your students are learning in their third grade mathematics classroom with what they're learning in their third grade science classroom. You ever heard this story about John Dewey? You ever heard John Dewey's laboratory school? You've heard of it, right? You know how the curriculum in John Dewey's laboratory school was set up? You're not going to believe this. You know what the fourth grade curriculum was? They did the school finances. They did the taxes. They balanced the books. That was their curriculum. The first graders recreated Phoenician society. They did weavings. They grew food. They recreated the boats. They did all the stuff because they were the newcomers. They were like the basic ones. By the time you got to 5th and 6th grade, what were you doing? You were running the kitchens. You were in charge of ordering the food. You were in charge of doing that stuff. Now, what do you have to know? To be able to do that sort of stuff, you got to know mathematics, and you got to know long division, and you got to know that stuff. But how are you going to teach it? Look at how John Dewey thought. He goes, I can teach this 2 ways. I can say, okay, here's how we add 2 plus 2 equals 4. Any questions, little Johnny? Right? Or you can say, we usually go through 4 boxes of Pop-Tarts. Sorry, I'm eating Pop-Tarts lately. We go through 4 boxes of Pop-Tarts every morning. We've only got 2. How many more do you think we need for tomorrow morning? Well, now, which one? Which form of addition, which form of teaching addition is going to stick? The abstract way, where you just do it, where it has nothing to do with the kids' reality, and where they drag themselves home, do their homework, and then go out to play? Or the type of homework where they are actually engaged in the process? Well, obviously the one where they're engaged in the process. And it's where the teacher functions not as an expert, but as a guide. And that's the big difference. Look, it comes down to this. A bad teacher is a babysitter. And a bad one. A good teacher is somebody that functions as a guide, that brings all of these curricular activities together, that helps the student understand how they hang together in a cohesive whole. The great teacher, now I'm not saying I'm a great teacher, but the great teacher is someone that takes it to the next level. And the great teacher is somebody that takes their obligations as a professional seriously. And this is where it gets really, really depressing. You think you're going to be done learning about education when you graduate? No. Look at the doctor. Well, if you're like me, when you were in college, you didn't have health insurance, but let's hope you have health insurance. Look at your doctor. You go into your doctor's office, what do you see sitting on his desk? Nice list. What do you see sitting on his desk? Stacks and stacks and stacks of journals, the latest literature, everything that's coming out. Why? So that this guy can keep up, or this woman can keep up on the latest stuff that's happening in the field. They have to be. Otherwise, they're no longer competent in their profession. Right? What else are you going to find? You're going to find tacked on their wall, or taped on their desk, or in one of their books, a code of ethics that they have to live up to as a professional physician, right? What does it mean? Staying up with the profession, treating each and every individual that they come into contact with respect, making sure that they report colleagues that are not holding up to the bargains that they agreed to with regards to the nature of the profession itself. Why do you want to become a teacher? Why? I'm going to go through the answers you can't give. You ready? I've got them written down. See, if you're thinking, wait a minute, I don't think I want to become a teacher. I don't want to make you think like that. But I want you to go into this honestly and realize how difficult this profession is. Here's some of the stock answers of why people want to become teachers. I like kids. Don't ever say it. I don't want to hear it. If you like kids, have some. I'm good around kids. Okay. If you think you're good around kids, volunteer in a classroom around 30 kids. Do it for about 3 weeks, and then ask yourself, can I really spend the next 30 years around these maniacs? Okay? I like the idea of having 2 months off a year. I got bad news for you. I got bad news for you. You know how I spend my 2 months off a year? The first 7 weeks is curled up into the fetal position, trying to recover from the emotional and physical trauma that I've just endured over the last 9 months. It seems like steady work with good benefits. Get a union job, okay? Because there's a lot of jobs out there that are a lot easier, that'll give you the same pay and the same benefits. I think it would be cool to get off work at 3:15 in the afternoon. It ain't going to happen for you. Because when you're sitting there at 10 o'clock waiting on the one kid's parents to show up for the parent-teacher conference,
Not only that, but don't you have to do
you got to
reports?
grade, you got to do the reports, you got to do all the stuff, you got to have, if you're in primary or secondary education, you got to do your planners, all that stuff's got to be set. It's not what just happens in the classroom. And conferences and everything. Yeah, you'll be looking at your friends that work 40 hours a week and be going, oh, must be nice, right? So don't think that those are the benefits. Ask yourself the question again, and don't answer it this way. Why do I want to teach? Your answer should sound something like this. I want a challenging job that pushes me to my limits, both intellectual, emotional, and physical. I want a job that is constantly forcing me to become better at what I do. You will never be a good teacher if you think you're one. You have to be constantly striving for that next level. I believe I have the unique type of skills that are necessary to become a successful teacher. Empathy, compassion, intellectual curiosity. And I want to make a positive impact on society, both for the current generation and for generations to come. Here's the bad news about being a teacher. You won't know if you did any good. Because the good that you do, you won't ever see it. It'll happen, I really hate to sound depressing, it'll happen after you're dead. Because it's like being a farmer. You'll plant a seed somewhere and you won't see it grow. And out of that seed will come another 100 seeds and you won't see those grow. And out of those seeds will come another 100 seeds and you won't see those grow. And so the benefits that you get, the value that you see of becoming a good teacher, you don't see those. It's not something that every once in a while a student will come back and say, look at class.
I have a question, but shouldn't you think that maybe I have left a seed somewhere?
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, I didn't say that. Yeah, of course. It's one of the reasons that you get into it. You're making a positive contribution. But if you think you're going to see that positive contribution, don't get your hopes up. Because it's those little effects that add up to the big whole picture. And it's something that John Dewey says, and I'm going to read a quote from him later, but it's something that John Dewey says, look, if you look at a really good teacher and what they do, they won't ever really see it or appreciate it. But at the same time, by being a good teacher, they lay the groundwork for the development of more good teachers in the future. And that's the key to growth in society. Right? There's a popular myth in American society that anyone can teach, and while the sources of this myth are a mystery to me, I think that it has something to do with the fact that we've all spent a lot of time around teachers. Some of them are really bad teachers, though we never really knew what made them bad teachers. They were mean, or they just didn't seem to care. Some of them were good, but a few of them were great teachers. But it was hard to know what made them tick. I had some great teachers who were incredibly hard on me. I had great teachers. Some of the best teachers I ever had made me cry. Serious. But I also had some great teachers who were the nicest people I've ever known. Go figure. Just as there is no formula for bad teaching, there's no formula for great teaching either. And this is the thesis of my presentation. By and large, and absent some neurobiological disorder, I think that with the right sort of training and education, most people can be made to be competent in the classroom. But there are those who simply lack the basic skill set of efficient teaching. If you don't have empathy, if you don't have intellectual curiosity, you should never be let loose around our kids. Sorry. And finally, there are those select few that have the unique set of personal and intellectual characteristics that make for a great teacher. Now, the great teachers are the ones that function as role models of democratic living. You have to set an example. Okay? You're not going to set an example with the clothes you wear. $99 at Marshall's. You're not going to set an example with the car you drive. 96 Honda Civic. But you have to set an example by the life that you live and the attitude towards intellectual curiosity that you possess. Look, this sounds dumb, but if there's one thing you should get out of college, it's a desire to read the New York Times every day or the Wall Street Journal every day. because you want to know what's going on in the world and you want to know how you connect with it. Great teachers are, in Dewey's words, mediators of experience. And again, this goes back to my earlier definition of experience. Experience isn't just the sensations of the moment, but the understanding of the processes that have made this moment possible and the future consequences of our actions in this moment. That's right back to your point. This means that teachers must be highly educated, not simply in their discipline, but in all of the forms of inquiry that their discipline touches upon. How these disciplines fit within the entire scope of human experience, and what makes them connect with our lives in general. As Dewey argues, this is an almost superhuman assignment. The educator who is able to, quote, integrate the activities of a busy classroom or an extramural project with the skill of a great orchestral conductor, and the resulting harmony is a wonderful experience indeed. But these teachers are rare, and we know very little about how they can be trained. Yet we do know that great teachers can be found, and the first step in this process is the cultivation of the tools necessary for individuals to reflect on whether or not they possess the traits that make for a great teacher. Things like patience, intellectual curiosity, the ability to think both critically and speculatively, and a basic sense of awe and wonder at the world, and a desire to better understand themselves and the society in which they live. These are things that we can teach about, but we cannot instill an appreciation for these sorts of things in those that have no desire to appreciate them. And those that can are the future great teachers of the world. Thank you. I'll take any questions. Yeah, what's going on?
All right, how you doing?
I've been better, but I'm hanging in there.
What do you think makes a great teacher, in your opinion?
I don't know. I mean, I tried to give you an outline. You remember when I said the part about absent some neurobiological disorder? I think that there are some people that just, and I'm not criticizing it. I'm not trying to make a judgment on it. But I think that there's some people that have trouble empathizing with the needs of other people, right? I think those people would be great in business. But you know what? I don't want to. I don't think I want them around my kid. I've seen what. Hey, how are you? Pleasure to see you.
Dr. Kincaid.
I've seen. In my own experience and the experience with my son, I've seen teachers that just can't connect with kids. And I'm not saying that they're bad people, but I am saying that I don't think that they should be in the classroom. They may make good administrators. They may make good business people. They may be very effective at other things, but I think that's part of it. You've got to be able to empathize. You've got to be flexible. One of the things that scares me the most is when somebody walks into a classroom and thinks that there's a one-size-fits-all approach to teaching every kid in that classroom. You've got to be able to say, look, what works with this kid may not work with that kid, may not work with that kid. And you know, one of the reasons, my kid's in a special school now, and one of the reasons why was that they walked in and they said, here's your homework assignment. Well, my kid is the type, and I'm not saying that he's super smart or anything, but you give my kid 5 long division problems, and he knows how to do them. Now, you give him 30, and that's busy time for him. And he doesn't want to waste his time doing 30 because he doesn't need it. He knows how to do it after 5. So he needs that sort of flexibility. But what have you got? First of all, you've got the strictures coming from the administration that says, well, this is the way it has to be done. These kids have to be doing X, Y, and Z. But then you've also got the assumptions that are coming out of certain, I'm not going to say everybody, but certain schools of education that say this is the model that you should use. And I think we have to be more flexible than that. And that's something that occurs on an individual level. And that flexibility is not something that comes easy. It demands intellectual curiosity. It demands It goes back to the part in the essay where I said, look, to be a teacher, you got to be smart. And that means that you've got, if you're teaching third grade mathematics, you better be able to answer a student's question about grammar. Because the relationships between grammar and mathematics can be very close and can be very profound sometimes, talking from a philosophical point of view. And so you've got to be able to integrate all those different avenues, all those different areas of knowledge. It's not just about a third grade teacher knowing how to teach third grade math. And I think that that's a challenge. I think that's a challenge that a lot of people won't undertake or simply can't. So that's what I mean. I think that's what I mean when I say a great teacher. Now, how do we teach somebody to have that? I don't know. I don't think we can. In a way, to a degree, I don't think you can. How do you teach somebody that it's important to understand the world around them? They're either going to, I can lead that horse to water, but I can't make him drink. See, that's what makes us so special. That's why nobody gets us. There's a lot of respect for teachers, but nobody understands us because there's so many people don't understand what it is that drives us. We ask questions that nobody else asks. We engage in forms of inquiry that nobody else engages in. Think of my job. You've seen my job in action. What makes 2 + 2 = 4 true? I spend weeks every year on that question. And the students are just going, and they want to say, why? Because don't take a picture of that. because my students are just like, okay, because it equals 4. And it's like, but how do you know? And that's the weird sort of stuff that teachers ask. And I happen to think it's something special. Maybe it's a defect. I don't know. It's a tough question.
Out of curiosity, what was your motivation to get into teaching, and how did you get to the field that you are now?
Wow, is that a long, long story? I just finished a book where I described. I've worked in 62 different job titles for 22 different employers in 5 different states. I've been everything from a chef to a custodian to an actor to a what else? I forget them all. The one commonality of all the jobs that I had was that I realized that the thing that I always liked was I always liked helping people understand what it was that I was trying to do, and to help people understand themselves and the world better. And I think that's what drew me into philosophy, and what drew me into teaching. I was reading Socrates, and I ran across the Socratic dictum, and the Socratic dictum says, "Know thyself." And I went, well, that doesn't seem very hard. Know thyself. My name's Shannon Kincaid. My social security number is, well, I'll say that. My social security number is, I'm 5'10½". I weigh 145 pounds, blah, blah, blah. But then I started thinking about it, and I realized, well, know thyself doesn't just mean knowing the facts about me. It means knowing who I am and what my values are. And knowing what my values are means knowing what my society is about. Knowing what my society is about means knowing where it's come from and the history of all of this stuff, and how these ideas and how these innovations have affected the person that I am. And in a weird sort of way, I'm sorry to say, but I'm an addict. I can't stop. I'm always engaged in this process of trying to understand who I am at a deeper level. Now, there's only one job in the world that lets you do that and pays you for it, and that's teaching. And that's what I mean. That's what I'm serious when I say it. You cannot appreciate until you have done the job how difficult it is and how challenging it is, both emotionally and intellectually. Because it is constantly forcing you to go to that next level. But for me, it's my lifeblood. I can't imagine not being able to do it. Now, I have my 2 months off in the summer. I spend 7 of those weeks in my fetal position. But on the 8th week, I'm dying to go back. I'm dying to go back because I want to go back in and I want to think of what my job is. I get to talk with some of the most interesting people in the world about some of the stuff that interests me and some of the questions that are almost unanswerable. If you go into 3rd grade teaching and you're teaching mathematics, look at what you get to do. You get to take students and you get to introduce them into the adult world of mathematics. You get to allow them to function and to move to that next level, to cultivate that experience to where they can take full advantage of who they are. And for me, there's no job that has any greater value than that. And so for me, I do it for selfish reasons. I do it because I love it, and I do it because I think it matters.
Dr. Kincaid, you mentioned that some of like the best teachers that you've come across that have taught you made you cry. Was that like in a good way?
No.
Was it in a bad way? And then can you like, because
I had a teacher one time. I had a teacher when I was in graduate school one time. He did this. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm about to introduce you to the best student I have ever had. This blackboard right here." He would start out his classes like this. He would walk around, and it was a course on Wittgenstein, and he would start his classes like this. He would always start. He was educated at Oxford, and so he did it in the old Oxford tradition. And he would walk around and he would go, "Mr. Kincaid, please explain the class. Bertrand Russell, please explain to the class." Whew. Sorry, look, I'm allergic to him because I'm like. "Mr. Kincaid, please explain to the class Bertrand Russell's conception of number." And I'd be like, "I think it has something to do with sets." And he would be like, "Correct?" And I'd be like, "Continue?" I'd be like, "No! My God, that is the stupidest thing I ever heard. Who wants to try next?" And of course the whole class goes like this. I'll tell you what, I learned Wittgenstein in that class. What do you want to know? And I learned a lot. I was terrified of the guy. Some guys, we'd get out of class and we'd go drinking beer. So it was really weird. I never knew, but there was something about the people. I mean, how do I say it in a nice way? You've had teachers that cared, and you've had teachers that didn't. And I hate to get all Kantian on you all, but you've had teachers that treated you as a means to an end. And you've also had teachers that treated you as an end in yourself, and you've known the difference. And when a teacher makes me cry, I had one professor, another one in graduate school. This was great. Another Oxford guy. I wrote a paper, and I'd always been told that I was a good writer. And I wrote the paper, and he made it 3/4 of the way down on the first page, and he drew a line, and he wrote, "I could read no further." Wow! I guarantee when that paper got done, he said, "You must write in much simpler sentences." So I wrote the paper. I was such a smart aleck. I wrote, "Husserl was a phenomenologist." Phenomenology is, and I wrote it like I was writing it for a 2-year-old. And he gets it, and I get it back, and he goes, "Much better." My writing improved 100% that semester. So it's not about being nice. It's not. I mean, I haven't been real nice here. I basically told you that you better rethink your decision. But it's about being treated honestly. It's about being treated fairly, and it's about being treated as a person and not just a means to a paycheck. Next question.
I'm scared.
You should be.
I'm scared. I am.
It's a terrifying job. But look, it's a terrifying job, but you will never. That's back to my point. I've worked 62 different job titles. I've been everything from a dishwasher to a chef. I've seen a lot. And I have never had a job that provides me with the sense of satisfaction, and especially here in Queens, at Queensboro. I've taught at 8 different colleges. I would never trade this job for any job that I've had in the world. It's a very special place. It's a wonderful thing to be able to share your life experiences and to push yourself to be the best teacher that you can be. Because you know, whether you're going to see it or not, you know that it's going to matter. And it might, with my goals are real low. I have 125 students a semester, 100 students a semester. 1. If I can hit 1, I'm happy. And if that 1 can hit 1 or 2 later on down the road, and that 1 or 2 hits 1 or 2 later on down the road, maybe in 4 million years, the world will start to look like I hope it'll look like. Be scared, but don't be intimidated.
I don't know if I'm the only one, but surprisingly, I don't feel intimidated. I feel motivated by it.
Good?
Yeah.
Then that's what you need to do. Be motivated by it. Stand up to the challenge. Because it's kind of what, and I don't want to make it sound hokey, but when I talk about being a professional, you can think of it in terms of being like a professional baseball player. Okay? What have you got to be? You got to have the talent and the skill. Okay? But you've got to cultivate that talent and skill. And that's scary, right? And then you've got to have the nerve and the guts to go through the process of showing people that you not only have the talent and the skill, but you've got the nerve to put up with it and to do it. And to improve your teaching at each and every turn. Because that's the difference between you being a good teacher and you being a great teacher. Not even talking about being a bad teacher. Because anybody can do that. My TV can be a bad teacher. I try not to let it be. Sometimes it's so easy to just throw in that. Watch this, son. Any other questions? Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
My name is Samantha Ayala, and I'm the president of Kappa Delta Pi and Alpha Sigma Gamma, and we would like to thank Professor Kincaid for his talk and lecture on good versus great teaching. I know I have definitely learned something from today, but hopefully, we all stick with it and we don't change our minds, and we do become great teachers for all of our students in the future. I would also like to thank our co-sponsors, the Future Teachers Society and the Campus Learning Center Club for co-sponsoring this event. And I would also like to thank Jennifer Severin for making this possible. Thank you very much for everything.